So first of all, thank you very much for agreeing to do this as fellow pilots going through training together many, many years ago. The reason we're going to chat is on the 7th of October, Hamas did a brutal invasion of Israel and seized well over 200 hostages. Now, almost immediately, Israel committed to a war against Hamas, but very little's being talked about the hostages and their situation. And there's three categories of hostages at the moment, it appears. One of which is foreign nationals. So, for example, there appear to be about 10 Americans unaccounted for. There's a lot of civilians, some of them have been released, elderly females, and they're all being used as part of these political pawns. But there's been no talk about negotiation around the military hostages that are being held. And it's very difficult to understand their plight because inevitably, very few people in the world have ever been through what they're going through. Now you are one of those people who, you weren't a hostage, you were a prisoner of war, but back in that fateful day, you spent 7 weeks incarcerated as a guest of the Iraqis, suffered some pretty nasty experiences. And I think you are almost uniquely well placed to be able to provide us with a sense of, not exactly, but the sort of things that must be going through some of the minds of those captives who are being held prisoner again at the moment, potentially underground, and just give us a flavour of what that must feel like. So can we start that, Joe? So thanks again for agreeing to come on. Obviously we go back a long way here, so it wasn't a very emotional time for both of us, even though it was much worse for you obviously. But can we start on that fateful day? You're flying your Tornedo jet at very low levels on a mission into Iraq, and suddenly your day went wrong. Can we start the story there?
Yes, I was involved in 1991, 17th of January, first day of the first Gulf War. We were attacking a dispersed operating base, Ramallah southwest. We went in for attack. It was a low-level attack, so our attack run was about 20 feet or so. We were doing about 550, 600 knots, so that's 600 plus knots. Miles an hour. Went into the target, shot at the whole way in by guns and missiles, anti-aircraft. Came off, we failed on that mission. Our bombs didn't come off for various reasons. Came off the target, we were on our way home, and a surface-to-air missile went up our right-hand engine, exploded, took out the fly-by-wire system, and then anti-aircraft guns hit my right-hand wing, hit the Sidewinder missile. It ignited the rocket propellant, and a 4-meter torch of flame shot out the front of the wing. So I'm now flying in a mechanical mode rather than through computer controls because the control surfaces have been shot with the aircraft, became a ball of flame, trying to solve the problems. And then it was going no further, so we ejected into the desert for 2 hours on the ground, and eventually about 25 soldiers found us, buried us in the sand by machine gun fire, captured. And the officer, long story short, said, "Please talk to us or we'll take you to the nasty people in Iraq, in Baghdad." So we said nothing and we were taken to the nasty people in Baghdad.
That must have been a complete shock though, because we both did conduct after capture training, didn't we? We were sort of preparing for when we were, if we were captured, that we'd look after name, rank and number. Clearly, when it's actually happening for real, what was going through your mind? Were they civilised about just... Because I'm thinking particularly these hostages that are being held in Hamas, the military guys might have some secrets. They might be being interrogated to try and find out what Israel's plans are. How able was your training able to help you for that moment? Was it any relevance, or was it almost a surreal experience? Because the way you found yourself now was completely alone with a bunch of, as you said, brutal fellows.
One has to be careful, first of all, on the word civilised, because that's one thing certainly in the Middle East find argumentative with the West, this word, who's civilised and who's not. We just happen to have the military might, and many of them don't have military might. Secondly, I was trained, as you say, in conduct after capture. And the lead up to war, because Kuwait was invaded 8th of August, we were training to go to war literally the day after. And so in that progression, first of all, I'd spent 10 years in the military training to go to war. Secondly, that it's accelerated, and it includes discussions about what would happen if. And so the difference between someone in the military and someone not in the military is one is trained in a progress that actually you've already set your mind prior. Now, I know many Israeli people most have gone through some sort of military training because that's how their nation works. But if you are not in the military in a uniform, there's a difference in psychological, emotional, etc. shock when an incident happens. I mean, it's shocking when you're in the military, make no mistake. But I had already set my mind what if and had thought through those circumstances. But when you're in a concert or a festival playing music, you do not expect to be subjected to AK-47s, which is a very specific sound, and extreme violence, and then with the capture. So they'll have that shock that they have to come to terms with. And I do believe it will be different between military and civilian people.
I think particularly we're going to focus on the military because the civilians, as we've already seen, some of the civilians have been released, but there's been no talk, even with the Qataris talking about negotiating the military folks, and they're most likely to, if there is going to be any physical violence, they're going to be mistreatment. That would appear to be where the focus will be. So going back to that sense of shock, you now found yourself in the hands of the Iraqis. That brutality you talked about, without going into the details of exactly what happened to you, but there must have been a shock to the system because it's a real wake-up call. It's pain. And you're isolated, you're alone, you're lonely. What was your prevailing sense at that time?
Well, the violence didn't really occur until Baghdad. When we got captured, they hit us about a bit, but not very much. And the standard military forces, the Iraqi officers in the airbase to which we got taken first, were actually, there was this almost empathy, because, we're similar. In the military, with uniform, you're effecting war, but in some ways, there was a strange moment, and they asked us questions, but they didn't do anything. So then I had 10 hours taken off to Baghdad, and in that moment, I sat there going, I know what's going to happen to me. I'm either going to be killed and die violently here, or I'm going to disappear in the Middle East for 10 years. I had seen all the prisoner of war movies when I was younger, and known about the Vietnam POWs, and I said, Midnight Express, for instance, the guy who famous movie. And so for 10 hours, I just set my mind, I will not come out a damaged human being. If I survive this and I come out in 10 years' time, you can pull my teeth out, you can cut my balls off, and you can break my legs. If I survive, I will not come out a damaged human being. So I had, sounds rather obscene really, I had 10 hours to set my mind. I basically said, I'm going to lock myself in, whatever you do, I'm going to lock myself into myself. Because I refused to be damaged, I suppose. But I was pretty much anticipating what was going to happen to me.
I was on an overseas detachment when your images first came up, and I know that night I was in tears because you always share the pain.
Half as much as I
No.
Actually, I'm joking apart. It's far more difficult for those at home because they don't understand. When you're in the position, actually one of the things pilots are, and I can only talk from my own, we compartmentalise. So literally, you've got your mission, bang, I'm on mission. And everyone says, was it different at war? No, you put in your cassette or data stick or whatever you want to call it in, right now you're on mission. You get shot down, now we're on escape and evasion. You get captured, now you plug in. So we're quite compartmentalised. So I don't know whether that makes us good, bad or indifferent. It just, you have been trained in this, and a certain type of character wants to be a military pilot. So yes,
But even though I'm not been trained to be a military pilot, but I still, even listening to you talk in the immediate aftermath and later, I still couldn't imagine that I could go through what you went through. I couldn't imagine how you have the mental resilience to do exactly as you said. It's all very well preparing that 10 hours up to Baghdad. I've no doubt the Israelis that have been captured will have tried to compartmentalise, but how on earth do you still manage? And you don't have any idea of time, I'm suspecting. You were incarcerated for 7 weeks. You won't know when it's going to end. How do you? I mean, it just sounds incredibly brave. We've known each other for years. Is it just you and unique that you?
I truly believe this because I've had so much attention because we came back to mass media attention. Everyone wanting to know. Human beings are built to survive. Look at virtually, if in the UK had Granville fire and how dignified the survivors who got through were. If you went back to, seeing we're talking Israel, the survivors of the Holocaust, how dignified they were. And actually, if you look at, dare I say, the Iraqis, who you could say were the opposite side to the effects of our intervention, how dignified they are. Human beings are built to survive. So this idea that I am unusual, that I've come back and come to terms with that experience, is not unusual. Human beings. So everyone, because we live a rather safe life in our country, does not mean that human beings are weak. And actually, I find this idea when we look at our youth of today, saying that the previous generation, Second World War generation, they had something, and the youth, look at they're feckless now. I disagree. The 18-year-olds who go to war will do the same thing. So human beings are not weak, and I have no attributes than anybody else. They will deal with it.
What about the sense of time? Because you can't have any track of time. They almost certainly depriving you, because if the hostages are in tunnels, it'd be very difficult for them to tell whether it's day or night. They might be deprived of some of the sensory stuff. Was that something you experienced, and how do you address that?
One of the things in military interrogation is they have dislocation of expectations. So they absolutely do. They remove all your aspects of time. They have a bag and head, you're blindfolded, you're handcuffed. In military, they put you in a room that's almost body temperature, which means you can't tell whether someone's you can't have that microsecond flinch before you can't feel anything coming towards you. So a hit coming towards you, it is totally out of the blue because you can't feel it. So they also use white noise which is like a crackly radio, which means you can't hear anything else. So what they're trying to do is keep you detached, which dislocates you from expectations. And then, yes, we were probably 18 hours a day in pitch black, 6 hours a day semi-pitch in a concrete box with a metal door, being systematically beaten and starved to death. So, yes, what you have is that, and what they're trying to do is impose a reliance upon your captors. That, why do they separate and isolate prisoners of war? Because we are weaker individually. And what they're trying to do is put almost your own worst enemy is yourself. So what I did was you end up ensuring that you're not defined by the circumstance. And I accepted I was probably going to die, but I couldn't think myself dead, and therefore why dwell on it? Because if you're still thinking you're not dead, I know it sounds rather a circular argument, but that's how you end up thinking.
You also said that it was probably more difficult for those who weren't there. Obviously, you've got a very strong wife that Helen have known for years, but how was it for the family? I mean, obviously, you didn't know at the time, but when you came back, what was the most difficult thing for them? I'm thinking particularly because the hostages that are held now, there's lots of families back in Israel who will be worried sick about their families. What turmoil did she go through, and your parents and your wider family?
Well, Helen would advocate. We had 2 children. We just had our daughter Tony. She was months old, and our son was 2 years old, Guy. So she was potty training and breastfeeding and doing everything at the same time. So actually, he said, well, that gave her focus, because like any mother, that you have to, there's more than enough work there. And she had the level of press attention because it was the first live televised war, which is why we were given so much attention. But yes, Helen is a strong character. We had talked about what if I died in war before we went, and our thing was just get on with life, find someone else, fall in love, and move forward. Very different for the hostages currently because it's unexpected, as I say. My parents, it was my dad actually, not my mum. My mum was relatively stoic. It was my dad who had real problems with my captivity, and he tried to volunteer to take my place, and that's where it's strange. When I got back, I was actually angry, not moved by that. Now I'm a father. I do understand why he thought that, but you almost how rapidly. I'm 61 now, and you go, our sons are better qualified. Our bodies are weaker. It was my job as well, and you go, Dad, don't ever try and think. However, I get it on an emotional level, but actually how rapidly our young men and women, our sons and daughters, are far more capable and stronger than we are because of their age.
After 7 weeks, you were finally released. There was a little bit of warning, I suspect, that your hair was being redone, you'd be prepared for release. But with the benefit of hindsight, how well prepared were you for that, when you actually were released, that sense of freedom that actually you had survived, not only personally now, but also the family, those first couple of days, and then also the media spotlight that fell on you, which is likely to fall on a lot of these Israelis. With the benefit of hindsight, how well prepared were you for that conflict?
Well, first, you're not actually prepared for the release. The bombing stopped, and we were bombed every day for 7 weeks. The ground vibrates for 18 hours a day, and you can hear all the sirens going off and bomb. And then suddenly it went quiet. And so you go, something has happened. Now, I anticipated, I had seen the level of power ring around Iraq before the war, and they weren't going to win militarily in terms of that. So you cannot help but hope something significant had changed. And I thought, we've won the war, because that's what I believed. But you have to temper that hope, because hope in that regard makes you soft, because then you think outside and it makes you drift, and you cannot afford to be soft inside captivity. The following morning they came knocking on the door, and they said, Flight Lieutenant Peters, the war is over, you're going home. And then he went, is there anything my staff can do for you? So yes, that was a bit weird. So long story short, they cleaned us all up, removed all our clothes, cleaned us up, showered, which was bucket overhead, trying to shave us a bit, doing all that, to then release us. So you had that, and we were released in 2 tranches. I was in the first tranche. And again, they were quite selective. They chose me, because rather than John Nickel, I think, because I looked more beaten up. They chose females, they chose the American. I mean, they were very deliberate in their first choice, because I'm sure they were still negotiating. And I thought that as I was being released. But then you get released, and the moment you are pushed out of the coach, when they moved us from the prison to the hotel in Baghdad, which was before they drove us through for the full release, yes, you go, how I describe it now, you go from a black box, so you're in a concrete box, completely isolated, to white light. You cannot see anything because there's so many flash bulbs going off, so many lights, and you are literally and you are suddenly, you realise you've gone from complete isolation to actually, as subsequently I realised, global attention. And that's 29 talking to me now at 61. That was shocking. You're pleased to be out, but you have to deal with, you very rapidly, or in every newspaper, shocking. Being in the military, every bloody senior officer that ever existed comes to see you. Weird. Everyone's your friend. You are a political football. And that is far more challenging on the return. And the fact that you can't go to a pub, you can't walk down the street without literally people hugging you and crying, men and women. And I returned to 25,000 letters. They were coming in at 1,500 a week from people who've been abused, people who've been raped, and you realise your whole landscape has changed.
Because from an outside perspective, even as a mate's perspective, you'd imagine that would have been overwhelmed by the joy of just being out. But clearly there was the legacy of that left some deep imprints. And also, you lost some friends, we both lost friends in conflict. The Israelis that have been captive, they wouldn't have known about a lot of people who died that day. Was there any sense of that sort of guilt that you survived and others didn't? Was there, there are just so many conflicts and emotions that really...
Yeah, there's conflicts. I get the fact I survived, but without, so it makes me sound rather unemotional, but when you're aircrew, I lost about 12 friends within a couple of years of leaving flying training because they flew into the ground. And as you know, I cried at the first funeral, really tearful at second, third, I had damp eyes, fourth. And you get attuned to a funeral. It's the nature of our role that we played. And you've got that psychological construct, you don't ever think it's going to be you. So you get catapulted, and in some ways you don't have enough emotional bandwidth to deal with sorting out, coming to terms with an experience, plus how every friend is suddenly contact you. And then you've got literally the globe. When I say the globe, people in the UK, and people in the military used to take the mickey out of it, and I'm the easiest target. But for all the mickey taking, all the bars, every single aircrew that was vehement in taking the mickey would individually come up to me almost in tears and give me a hug. Air marshals crying on your shoulder. So a 55-year-old man crying in your arms. And you've got that rank difference. So that's what I'm saying. People look at the gloss of the attention of TV and radio, but it's not just in the Britain, Daily Mail, Sky TV. You're talking, it's Hungarian, French, German, American, Australian. There are hundreds of this, all with cameras, all with wanting to know this. Who are you? What are you about? At the same time as balancing off, reintroducing Helen and I, our relationship again, because effectively, it's almost like going out on a first date again, as you start to explore how's your life been in this black hole we've both been on. Because I have 2 children. I didn't see Tony until she was 4 months old. So there's this, yeah, sure, you try and deal with, it is so complex trying to just balance off, how to balance off your parents, how everyone speaks to you.
Did you find that because you were part of a military family, was that any help when you came out? Because some of the Israelis, one of the things when they come out, the very banter you talk about is banter that we use to break down some of the barriers sometimes. But I know when you've spoken to before, you felt a bit alienated from the military. How are they going? Is it going to be a help to be in the military and get brought back into that family, or could that also be a hindrance for the Israelis, do you think?
Air Force, Royal Air Force, was wonderful to return to the Air Force family. All that banter is exactly what you need. And certainly you need people who keep your feet on the ground when the world with the press is, effusive about you. So that is absolutely wonderful and inclusive and lovely. And that is the power of any military system. You are part of this family that hugs you in. So on that pastoral side, seriously, at every level, people were really good. When you said felt alienated, one, because all my friends on the squadron went to war together. My war was on my own, even with John Mickle, we were isolated. So you deal with your sense of dignity, humiliation, whether you're strong, weak, how you're going to die, all that sort of stuff. And will it be painful? Yes, it will be. You deal with all that on your own, and that's the constant threat. So the circumstance itself is isolating, and then the media isolates you out, because I went to war, and I very much believe this. I went to war with the Royal Air Force. And yet, people who did the most amazing things got zero attention, and John and I were like oxygen thieves. We sucked out all the oxygen. And however much you apologise to everyone and try and explain you can't meet everyone. And do you know the most moving thing? When I talk to the guys actually went to war with my squadron, do you know the most thing that you go, is they all absolutely understood. And do you know that was almost even worse? You just go, God, it would almost be better if they were angry. So you just have to cope with it yourself. When you say at times, then subsequently as you get older and you mature into that level of the dichotomy of your life in terms of military and media, you realise you don't have a hope in hell of a real military career because they're oil and water. And so does that make, not resentful, but you just realise that whatever your ambitions and dreams were before, they're shot. But then you've got the dichotomy of, yes, but where the average Air Force pilot has an opportunity here, you've been given a life opportunity that is so ridiculously removed from reality. But so it's I don't know whether I'm describing it, it's multivariate. There's not one obvious answer there.
No, but I guess I remember the banter at the time from a load of different people, and sometimes it sounds quite insensitive, but part of it, as you say, it's just what you do.
I love it, and it's necessary.
But also, I think, and I've said this to you before, I think despite the banter, none of us would ever want to go through what you went through. And that's not a soundbite, that is genuinely...
No, you wouldn't.
And the very fact that you came through it, many of us were not convinced you'd come out of that alive, because none of us knew. The Israelis, they don't know if their hostages are going to come out alive. And I think, as you say, for a lot of it, it's as tough, if not harder, for those outside, because they are, feeling sorry for you, and that sounds patronising, but you know what I mean, but also without knowing how you're managing. And I think that's my final sort of point on this is, what message would you have for those families of the Israeli military hostages there who are worried sick, sleepless nights? Is there any solace for them? Or is it actually part of a, they're going to find inner strength, they're going to manage. If they die, there's nothing that can be done about it. But what is there any message that you give sort of 30 years on, having reflected on this for so long?
I don't think there is a message, because how do you tell a parent they've lost their son or daughter? And for all the solace they have to deal with that level of grief. For the individuals who are in captivity, they will find their own route out when they return, whether they're fated or vilified in the press. The press is the press is the press. They just want a story. And they will push and push to find some sense of a story when, and I'm a product of the media, I'm not negative towards the media, but en masse, that can have an adverse effect. If they're not the sort of people who are as vain as I am, let's say. I think we have enough experience of trauma at war globally. Each of the individuals and the families, God willing that they come out alive, will come to terms in their own way with their experience. You'll have a couple who will do media. There will be the vast majority, I'd imagine, who will just want to go back to the wonderful thing called normal life.
Do you think that people ever fully recover from those experiences though?
Absolutely. I do not. I know we concentrate on PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, again, because that's a media story, but if you look at the percentages of people who suffer, it's actually rather small. I totally believe in therapy, that you can actually say, are you okay? You can get a therapist, are you okay? Well, you're going through that coping mechanism. Well, I thought I was okay, maybe I'm not okay. You can actually send people into therapy by having those conversations. So, but we're a lot brighter now. I mean, the psychologists and psychiatrists are well aware of things like that. But let's not assume that everyone's going to come out damaged. Let's not assume that everyone has PTSD. So I'm the total opposite from my experience. I mention very often to people, post-traumatic growth, because you've heard about that. But most people will go, no, well, it's the opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder almost. So that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Nietzsche. So you end up, well, for me, from the experience, however abhorrent it was and however frightened, I found myself with a newfound confidence. So what's the worst the world's going to do to me now? Are you going to torture me? Well, I've gone through that. Are you going to kill me? I found I'm not frightened of death, and I'm be very careful to assume just because I flew military fast jets that I'm a strong character. Not particularly. I think most of us are beautifully weak. Human beings are frail. Actually, I found something that actually go, well, no, human beings are not as frail as you think they are. And this idea that you get defined by a circumstance. So in some ways, I now go, when people, are you okay? Why should I not be okay? Why do you think that some level of adversity that I should be damaged? Why do you not believe that I have come out stronger? And the Iraqi interrogators would have won if I had not got back in the military jet and I hadn't continued on my life in a stronger sense. So that's how I cope with it. You go, it happened. Was I scared? Yes. Was I vulnerable? Yes. Was I pathetic and weak? Would I have liked to be stronger in captivity? Yes. But I don't define myself by that experience.
John, we've known each other for 40 years. It's always humbling, genuinely humbling to hear you talk about it. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Right.